You're listening to episode 25 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to know if you're ready for fat loss. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always. And first, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time with me on this podcast. I know there's a lot of great podcasts out there that you could be listening to, and the fact that you're choosing to spend this time with me is something that I do not take for granted. And I'm so grateful to have you as a listener, whether you're a brand new listener and this is your first episode, or this is 20 plus for you that you've been listening to every single one that I've published. So no matter who you are or how you have come to this podcast, I just wanted to say thank you and express my gratitude for you choosing to spend your valuable time with me. So the reason why I decided to talk about this particular topic today, how to know if you're ready for fat loss, is because I'm currently, as of the time of this recording, working on an online program that covers my fearless approach to fat loss that I take my private clients through, and I'm converting it into a online program essentially. And we have a beta group going through it at this point. There's a little over 30 people total that are going through the program. A few of them were ones that were in my Fed and Fearless course, and so they were gifted the program. And then other people were ones who found out about the beta via my email newsletter and jumped on the super low beta price that I offered. So we have about 30-ish people that are testing the program at this point. And I've been getting a lot of really awesome and kind of interesting feedback about the program so far, as well as what the women are learning. And I wanted to share with you all one of the more popular lessons that I taught in that course, so you can get a sense for where you are in a fat loss journey, if fat loss is healthy for you, if it's something that you should even be trying right now, or if potentially there's some other things that you might need to be focusing on rather than fat loss. So I wanted to share this with you because, like I said, all the women that are going through the beta have shared that it's been so valuable and really kind of surprising for them to learn about how to recognize whether or not their body is ready for fat loss. And I wanted to give you all the opportunity to learn about it as well. So the whole purpose of this podcast is to answer the question, is your body ready for fat loss? The truth is, not all bodies are ready for healthy and safe fat loss. And it's really important to know if that's you before embarking on any purposeful fat loss journey. My philosophy is that most people at most times in their lives should be focusing on weight maintenance when it comes to their food and their exercise choices. And if they're going to be experimenting with any fat loss approaches, it needs to be a short-term and very focused period of time. And the rest of the time, you should really be focusing on maintenance. This is all stuff I teach in my fat loss course. If you want to find out more about that course, feel free to DM me. By the time this particular podcast comes out, it's possible that that course may be available to the public. I have no guarantees because it's a work in progress, but please DM me on Instagram if you want to talk about this course. It's possible that it might be available for enrollment. But like I said, I want to help you guys understand if you're one of the people who is not ready for a fat loss, because there are a variety of different signs and symptoms that you can pay attention to see if you are somebody who is ready for fat loss or possibly needs to be dealing with health concerns and really maximizing your health before getting into a fat loss protocol. So there's going to be 16 different signs and symptoms I'm going to cover. I know that sounds like a lot, but I didn't want to leave anything out because I just don't want anybody to think that if their symptom wasn't mentioned, that maybe that means that they are 100% good to go for a fat loss protocol. These 16 different symptoms are ones that I see most common in my one-on-one client practice, as well as the group coaching programs that I offer. And it's something that, if you are experiencing one or more of any of these following 16 symptoms, it's very, very important that you see some kind of healthcare provider to get your health evaluated before doing any sort of weight loss or fat loss diet. I mean, I do think that that's just good advice for anybody, regardless of the state of your health. But if you see yourself recognizing any of these symptoms as ones that you experience, then I definitely want you to check in with your own doctor or your own registered dietitian or some kind of credentialed healthcare provider that can help you determine if a fat loss protocol is safe and healthy for you. So like I said, I have 16 different symptoms to watch out for. And if you find yourself saying yes to any of these, then you definitely want to put any of your fat loss diet or exercise habits on pause and really get to the root of your actual health concerns. So the first symptom I'm going to share with you is fatigue or weakness. If you are feeling tired all the time and your energy is just really low and not really ever feeling good across the day, then this could be a sign that you're not ready for a fat loss diet. Now, this is way more than just minor tiredness. I think we live in a society that unfortunately, it's relatively common to have a little bit of fatigue here and there, whether that's feeling a little groggy when you wake up in the morning or getting a little bit of an afternoon slump in energy. I'm not saying that that's ideal, but honestly, the way that most of us live modern lives, sometimes it's a little bit unavoidable. Just use myself as an example. I'm on screens during the day way more than I would. If I was independently wealthy and had no business that I needed to run, I don't know if I'd be on the screens as much as I am right now. So it's one of these things where lifestyle factors can definitely affect our energy. And sometimes if we live in a modern world, we just have some modern influences on our energy, and it's not always 100% ideal the way it could be if we were living in a more natural situation. All of that said, if you're experiencing more than just minor tiredness and you're really getting into that state of fatigue, which includes muscle weakness, brain fog, poor concentration, and very low energy, you are not in a place where you should be focusing on intentional fat loss. And the reason for that is because any sort of intentional fat loss diet can actually increase fatigue in the short term. You're much better off focusing on improving your energy and really figuring out why you might be feeling this fatigue before trying to lose fat. Now, that doesn't mean that in the process of working on your energy, you might not also see some weight loss as a side effect. It just means that if you're feeling that fatigue on a day-to-day basis, you don't want to be putting energy into an intentional fat loss protocol, because you will most likely experience a worsening of that fatigue when you're implementing a fat loss protocol. The next symptom I want you to be watching out for is insomnia. The inability to sleep well, whether that's falling asleep or staying asleep, can be a sign of inadequate calorie intake or being in a high stress state, which both of those are signs that you need to focus on maintenance calorie intake and de-stressing. The truth is that calorie restriction can actually make insomnia worse, primarily due to the impacts it has on stress hormones like cortisol. So if you are already in a high stress state and your cortisol is already a little dysregulated, going into a purposeful calorie deficit will actually make that worse. And on the flip side, poor sleep actually increases the likelihood of gaining body fat and experiencing increased hunger during the day as well. So if you're not sleeping well, it actually makes it even harder to lose fat than if you were sleeping well. So if you're somebody who struggles with insomnia, either you've fall asleep and then wake up a bunch throughout the night, or if you really have a hard time falling asleep at night and you toss and turn for hours before falling asleep, that should be your number one focus. You need to make sure you get your sleep on track before you try to implement any sort of intentional weight loss or fat loss protocol. The next sign that your body's not ready for fat loss is low body temperature. Low body temperature can be directly caused by inadequate calorie intake. The reason for that is because body heat is created through the process of burning calories. Basically, our body, when we use calories, it does not capture 100% of the energy as a fuel source called ATP. ATP is our body's it's the energy our body uses to do all of its functions, essentially. And through that ATP creation process, we do actually lose some of that energy that could have been turned into ATP as heat. And that's a completely normal process as part of our metabolism. And the more calories that we're converting into ATP, the more heat that we're producing as a byproduct. So if you're cold all the time, this can actually indicate a low metabolic rate, whether that's from something like hypothyroidism or just the sheer fact that you're not eating enough calories to really be creating that heat response. So what I recommend is that you work on improving your metabolic rate and getting your thyroid evaluated before working towards a fat loss goal. Because like I said, the less calories that you eat, the less heat you're going to be producing and the colder you're going to feel, and it's just going to make things feel a lot worse. The next sign to be watching out for to tell you that you're not ready for a fat loss diet is hair loss. The fact is that under eating in total calories, as well as things like protein, carbs, or fat, can cause excessive hair loss. Any sort of deficiency that develops from chronic malnourishment, such as proteins, minerals, essential fatty acids, and vitamins, can directly cause hair loss or other abnormalities in your hair health, such as changes in your hair color and even the structure. So if you're finding yourself losing a lot of hair either in the shower or when you brush your hair, or if you're noticing even things like thinning patches or bald spots, you definitely don't want to be working on an intentional fat loss goal until your hair loss is addressed. Again, hair loss can be a sign of hypothyroidism, which is exacerbated by calorie deficits. And it can also simply be a sign of overall malnutrition. And if you're already malnourished, then trying to intentionally lose body fat is going to be something that greatly exacerbates these health issues that are created by nutrient deficiencies. And so we don't want to be creating even worse nutrient deficiencies by focusing on a fat loss protocol. Another sign or symptom that you may not be ready for a fat loss diet and lifestyle change is weak or brittle nails. Brittle nails can often occur due to a lack of protein or fat in the diet, which is very common if you're somebody who has been chronically under eating. There are also other vitamin and mineral deficiencies that can lead to weak or brittle nails, including things like iron, zinc, B vitamins in general, magnesium, or vitamin C. Any of these can become deficient if you've been chronically under eating. And so if you're noticing weak or brittle nails, you need to make sure you're addressing any sort of dietary nutrient deficiencies, whether that's protein, fat, maybe even carbs, and then those specific micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that do contribute to nail growth. You need to make sure that you are working with someone to help address those nutrient deficiencies before working towards any fat loss goal and doing any sort of calorie deficit. The next symptom you need to be looking out for to tell you if you're not ready for fat loss is mood disorders. Both anxiety and depression can be worsened by dieting, and caloric restriction can actually cause those symptoms of anxiety or depression like irritability, mood swings, and just any sort of mood disorders that can come up when you are essentially underfed. I mean, there's a reason that we have a term hangry these days, because people really do have immediate mood reactions to a calorie deficit or an energy deficit. So in the short term, you can definitely experience mood disruption from calorie restriction. And then in the long term, that chronic calorie restriction can actually create these mood disorders that are more ongoing as opposed to situational. So if you are somebody who is experiencing anxiety or depression, I definitely don't think you should be embarking on an intentional fat loss journey. And you really need to be focusing on your overall health and well-being. If fat loss comes from that, if you see that you're losing weight because you're taking better care of yourself, that's fine, but we don't want to be actually engaging in an intentional caloric deficit, whether that's from eating less or moving more. The next sign and symptom to be watching out for is one that honestly tends to shock people because they had no idea that this has to do with undereating, and that is overnight urination. Frequent urination overnight is not normal. I want to hammer that home because I think there's so many people out there that have that symptom that have no idea that what they're experiencing is not actually normal. Frequent urination overnight, which would be, in my mind, more than once, is not normal. Our bladders should really be inactive overnight. They should be responding to our overnight hormones, specifically melatonin, and actually shutting down the urge to urinate. So if our bladder is waking up, usually it's because of an increase in stress hormones. So I see this most often in people who are under eating, particularly in carbohydrates. Maybe they're on a really low carb diet, or for whatever reason, they just have no idea what the amount of carbs are that they're eating compared to what they need for their activity level. And they end up on a accidental low carb diet. This is something that will lead to a drop in blood sugar, especially if you're also under eating in calories. That drop in blood sugar overnight increases your stress hormones, such as cortisol, and that rise in cortisol ends up waking us up and triggering the urge to pee. The other part of that that's important to remember is that the same glands, the adrenal glands that produce cortisol, also adjust your fluid balance in your body. So if you have a big surge in adrenal hormones, it is something that affects our fluid balance and actually creates that filling of the bladder, which then triggers the urge to pee as well. So if you are someone who's waking up more than once a night to pee, or if you wake up to pee and you can't fall back asleep after getting up to go to the bathroom, you may need to focus on eating more for a while and really getting that symptom under control. So not only that you're sleeping well, but you're also not having that cortisol surge overnight, so that down the road, when you're ready to lose body fat, you're in a better state of health and your stress levels are reduced and you're sleeping well, and you're much more likely to have success with your fat loss goals when you're in that kind of state. So like I said, this one, I can't stress it enough. If you're getting up even once a night, I would say is not ideal, but if you're getting up more than once a night to pee, this is definitely something you need to be paying attention to, and you need to figure out if undereating is an issue you need to deal with. All right, so the next sign or symptom that you are not ready for a fat loss diet or a lifestyle change is one that you probably have heard me talk about a lot if you follow my blog or if you follow me on Instagram, and that is the loss of your menstrual cycle. Now, this doesn't apply to women who have gone through menopause, so I just want to make that clear. If you know for a fact that you're postmenopausal, then not having a menstrual cycle does not mean that you cannot do any sort of fat loss protocol. But if you're somebody who is generally, if you're under the age of 45 and you have not been diagnosed with menopause, if you're not getting a menstrual cycle, you should not be purposefully embarking on a fat loss journey. And the reason for that is because irregular or missing periods can be a sign of inadequate calorie intake or too low body fat. Usually the truth is that it's more of an indicator of inadequate calorie intake, because I've worked with clients in my Get Your Period Back program who were at a higher body fat percentage but had lost their period simply due to the lack of calorie intake or perhaps too much exercise or a combination of both. And so if you're not getting your menstrual cycle and you're premenopausal, that is very often a sign that you are actually not getting enough calories or potentially burning too many calories. And to eat less and move more than you're already doing would be something that would exacerbate those hormone issues. Now, I want to throw a caveat in here because it is true that occasionally fat loss can help normalize a period, but I typically only see that happening in women with body fat percentages above 30%. So if your body fat percentage is higher than 30% and your periods are irregular or absent, it is possible that an intentional fat loss protocol would actually help you stabilize your hormones and get a regular period. But if you are below 30% body fat, which a lot of the women I work with in my Get Your Period Back program are, if you're not getting a period regularly and you're premenopausal, you absolutely need to be focusing on your hormone health before engaging in any sort of purposeful fat loss journey. The next sign or symptom that you are not ready for fat loss is low blood sugar. Low blood sugar can really show up as a lot of different symptoms, And sometimes it can be a little tough to figure out if low blood sugar is actually the cause of the symptoms that you're experiencing. But here are just some of the symptoms of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar that you might be experiencing that you really need to figure out if blood sugar is an issue before proceeding towards any sort of fat loss goal. These symptoms include anxiety, blurred vision, confusion, dizzy spells, fatigue, headaches, heart palpitations, increased hunger, irritability, lightheadedness, sleeping problems, sweating, and weakness. So again, not a comprehensive list. There's probably a lot of other symptoms that you can experience from low blood sugar. And, everybody's going to have their own experience and own symptoms when they are in a low blood sugar state. But if these are symptoms you're experiencing on a regular basis, or if you notice that when you get really hungry, you experience them, or if you have a high carb meal and you feel that way afterwards, that's more of a reactive hypoglycemia response. But if you are experiencing hypoglycemia, then you need to figure out that before you embark on any sort of fat loss journey. The next symptom that you need to be watching out for is low thyroid activity. I did mention that a few of the symptoms we've already talked about can be signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism, but if you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, then you definitely need to be very cautious about your fat loss journey that you want to embark on. Hypothyroidism affects at least 1 in 8 women, and that's just who get diagnosed. Subclinical hypothyroidism, which is a lower thyroid activity without it actually becoming diagnosed as hypothyroidism, is likely far more common than that 1 in 8 women. Low free T3, which is the main hormone that the thyroid uses for its activity, anything below 3.0 picograms per milliliter can indicate low thyroid activity, even if you are not diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And the truth is, in the people who are under eating and overtraining that are creating hypothyroidism from those behaviors, a lot of times you actually have either normal or low levels of thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH, because essentially your brain is purposefully slowing down your metabolism to account for your lower calorie intake or your higher calorie burn. So a lot of times I see this subclinical hypothyroidism in my clients who are under eating, over exercising, or a combination of both. And the reason that they're not diagnosed with hypothyroidism is because their TSH is normal or even low. So if you're somebody who's experiencing hypothyroid symptoms and you have low free T3, which is under that 3.0 picograms per milliliter, you need to focus on your thyroid health before ever purposefully trying to lose fat. One, you probably won't be successful if you are in a state of hypothyroidism that's not being managed. And two, you can make your thyroid health worse if you're purposefully trying to lose fat without actually dealing with your thyroid health beforehand. Another sign to watch out for that can indicate that you're not ready for a fat loss protocol is overuse injuries, especially things like stress fractures, which can indicate malnutrition. Overuse injuries, which I see a lot of the times in some of my more active clients, especially if they're doing high intensity activities like CrossFit or lots of long distance running or triathlons, anything that they're doing a lot of repetitive movement over the course of the week. Those overuse injuries many times stem from excessive exercise combined with inadequate recovery. Now, part of recovery is adequate calorie intake. And I've worked with athletes before who, even though they were doing all their physical recovery things like mobility and sleep and icing and all of those things that can potentially help with recovery, they weren't engaging in appropriate calorie intake. And that is one of the most important parts of recovering from a high level of exercise. So if you're somebody who is very active and experiencing frequent overuse injuries, you really need to focus on healing and strengthening your body before purposefully trying to lose body fat. The next symptom to look out for to tell you that you're not ready for a fat loss protocol is gastrointestinal problems. Low calorie intake and long-term dieting can actually cause functional gut disorders like IBS. And symptoms of IBS include things like constipation, gas, bloating, early satiety, diarrhea, and stomach pain. So if you're experiencing any of those symptoms, you need to be looking at your gut health before working on a fat loss goal. And your attention should be really focused on normalizing your gut health. And that includes dealing with any sort of GI infections that might be present. Now, this is something you definitely want to get help on, because identifying and treating GI infections is something you should be doing under the care of a licensed, credentialed provider. But all of that said, if you are experiencing these gut issues, you definitely want to focus on that first and not go into any sort of purposeful fat loss protocol, because inadequate calorie intake and long-term dieting can actually make these gut disorders worse. Another sign and symptom to look out for to tell you that you're not ready for a fat loss journey is poor athletic performance. Now, if you're an athlete, you might be familiar with the term bonking. Bonking is the sudden fatigue and loss of energy, which is caused by the depletion of glycogen stores in the liver and the muscles. And if you're on a calorie restricted diet with the purpose of fat loss, that calorie restriction by nature is going to deplete your glycogen. So you are going to bonk much faster than if you were to be fully fed prior to that workout. Now, we're not only thinking about calorie intake prior to the workout, we also have to consider calorie intake post-workout, because inadequate calorie and protein intake after your workout also stunts your muscle recovery once you've actually completed the workout. And that will lead to signs and symptoms like a lack of progress in your strength, or even a loss of strength over time and feeling more weak during your workouts. So if your training is suffering, I strongly encourage you not only to cut back on your activity, but also to work on getting to a maintenance calorie amount until your performance is normalized and you're starting to see progress in your performance indicators again. And then you can start to think about if fat loss is something that you're ready to do. Another sign to be looking out for that can tell you that you're not ready for purposeful fat loss is low bone density, especially if you're a woman that is under the age of 60 years old. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be experiencing osteoporosis just because you're older than 60, but if you're in an osteoporotic state and you are a younger woman, then you definitely are at risk for malnutrition. And that's almost 100% likely the reason why you would be experiencing low bone density as a young woman. So when I say malnutrition, calories is the number one thing, but also any sort of protein, carb, or fat deficiency, as well as any of the micronutrients, like especially calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K2, vitamin A, all of these nutrients that help us build bone are ones that can be deficient when we're under eating. And I see this most frequently in the women I work with that have hypothalamic amenorrhea and the female athlete triad. And my approach is always to ensure appropriate calorie intake with balanced macronutrients based on your activity level, and possibly even reducing your activity level while you're healing your bone density. That doesn't mean you go down to nothing, because actually weight-bearing exercises, especially strength training, can actually help build up bones. And so you don't want to be completely inactive to rebuild good bone density, but you want to make sure that you're not over-exercising if you have a bone density issue. So if you are somebody who has been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, or even just low bone density for your age, intentional fat loss must be put on hold until your bone health is improved. And unfortunately, bone health can take a really, really long time to really recover. So this needs to be something you're focusing on for several months, if not years, before you're ready to experiment with intentional fat loss. Another sign that your body's not ready for intentional fat loss is low sex drive. Low sex drive is often caused by low hormone levels, such as testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and those hormones are very strongly affected by total calorie intake, total carb and fat intake, and our body fat percentage as women. So if you are getting too lean, if your body fat percentage is dropping too low, that can really kill your libido. It drops your estrogen. It even can affect your testosterone and your progesterone. And when you have low levels of those hormones, especially estrogen, you're going to experience symptoms like vaginal dryness, possible pelvic floor dysfunction, and a lot of times that actually makes sex very uncomfortable. So not only does your libido drop, but even the ability to enjoy sex will be affected by these low hormones. And that combination is a total sex drive killer. So we don't want you to be dieting away your sex drive. It's one of these things that it's very ironic that so many women that are dieting, they do so because they want to feel sexy, they want to feel attractive, but then they end up dieting so much that they have no sex drive and sex is uncomfortable. And it just turns into the situation where they're not even enjoying or wanting sex because they don't feel good. They don't feel sexy. They don't feel physically able to enjoy sex no matter what their weight is. So I definitely don't want you guys to get caught in that trap of thinking that dieting is somehow going to improve your sex life if you are already experiencing issues with hormones and low sex drive. The final sign or symptom, I don't know if I'd really call this a symptom, but the final thing to be paying attention to that tells you you're not ready for a fat loss goal is pregnancy. No woman should ever be purposefully losing weight while pregnant. Pregnancy and breastfeeding is a highly energy demanding state, and there's never a time where weight loss or fat loss is recommended during pregnancy. Even women who are in the significantly overweight or obese category of BMI are still recommended to gain 11 to 20 pounds during pregnancy. So again, there's no body size out there that would ever be recommended to lose weight while pregnant. I just want to make sure you all know that because there's a lot of misinformation about weight gain during pregnancy. And even if you are at a higher BMI category, even in that obese category, you still need to be gaining weight during your pregnancy and you should not be purposefully losing weight. So if you know that you're pregnant, I implore you to hold off on your purposeful fat loss goals at least until your baby is born and even until your baby is mostly weaned. And one of the reasons for that is because prolactin, which is a hormone that goes up during breastfeeding, actually makes it harder for women to lose body fat. So even though some women go back to their regular body size because of the extra energy burned from breastfeeding, a lot of women actually struggle to lose body fat while they're breastfeeding because of the influence of prolactin. So even if you're postnatal, you've already given birth, you're not pregnant anymore, you're breastfeeding, that's not necessarily a good time to be focusing on purposeful fat loss. It's okay if you lose some fat because of the natural processes that happen postpartum, but I really encourage you to wait until your baby is mostly weaned if you're breastfeeding before you start thinking about a purposeful fat loss goal. All right, so those are my top 16 signs that your body is not ready for fat loss. I'll just review them super quick, just go over each one of them so you remember, but all of these are ones that you need to be paying attention to. Fatigue or weakness, insomnia, low body temperature, hair loss, weak and brittle nails, mood disorders, overnight urination, loss of menstrual cycle, low blood sugar, low thyroid activity, stress fractures, and other overuse injuries, gastrointestinal problems like IBS, poor athletic performance, low bone density or osteoporosis, low sex drive, and pregnancy. If you are checking off any of those signs and symptoms as a yes, and now you're thinking, okay, well, what if I want to lose body fat and I have some of those signs and symptoms? What do I do? My recommendation is to focus on getting your body healthy before attempting to lose body fat. This is something that so many women get backwards. They think that their health journey requires an attention to fat loss. And the truth is, it's generally the exact opposite. By focusing on your health first and really maximizing your health, you're actually putting your body at a better place to be able to lose body fat and preparing your metabolism for a short-term calorie deficit so that you can really get into a place where you are burning extra body fat if you're in a calorie deficit for a short period of time and not tanking your metabolism, tanking your hormones, or negatively affecting your day-to-day quality of life. So this is what I recommend for all of my clients that work with me on fat loss, as well as everybody going through my fat loss program, to really emphasize putting your health first, getting your body into the healthiest state possible before making any sort of attempt to lose body fat. My philosophy at the end of the day is that nobody should ever sacrifice their health for fat loss. I know that it can be a little confusing because sometimes there are cases where losing body fat can improve health, but that does not mean it's ever worth sacrificing components of your physical, mental, or spiritual health in order to achieve fat loss. So I just wanted to share that with you because, again, I speak to so many women who either are in a state of poor health and think that losing body fat would be a good thing to focus on, and they realize that they need to get their health improved first before focusing on fat loss. Or unfortunately, there's a lot of women out there that were in good health and then way overemphasized the fat loss element of their diet and exercise routine and ended up creating these health issues that they're now having to recover from. So those stories are so common, and I really want to help all of you avoid that kind of outcome and recognize that not everybody is in a state of health that would allow for fat loss, and you really need to be aware of your own health before engaging in any sort of fat loss protocol. So again, this is stuff that I teach in my online fat loss course. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I'm not 100% sure if this course is finished by the time this podcast is published. But if you're listening and you want to DM me on Instagram and ask me about the program, I can let you know if it's available to join. And you can learn more about my philosophy of how to not only prepare your body for fat loss, but also to eat and exercise in a way that really supports your health so that losing body fat is something that is improving your day-to-day health and well-being as opposed to causing a worsening of your health. All right, so that's all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful. Like I said, please get in touch with me. Send me a DM on Instagram. Let me know what you thought about this episode, if you had any aha moments. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I encourage you to head over to iTunes, hit subscribe so that way you never miss an episode. And while you're there, leave me a positive review. First of all, I love hearing your feedback. It's something that really helps give me purpose and passion for putting the work into this podcast on a weekly basis. And it also helps other people find the show and be able to get exposed to the information that we talk about on this podcast. So your review means so much to me, and also your subscription. If you're a subscriber, I'm so grateful for your time and your willingness to share a little bit of your life with me. And like I said, anytime you want to connect with me about the podcast, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. Happy to answer you there, chat with you there, and let me know if there's any topics that you want me to talk about, because I'm always open for different opportunities to talk about the topics that are most important to you. All right, well, that's it for me this week. Thanks again for hanging out. I will look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care. Hey everybody, Laura Schoenfeld here again. I'm so excited to announce that I now have openings for new private clients to begin working together in 2020. I have worked with hundreds of clients over more than 6 years on a variety of health conditions. My areas of expertise include hormone health and fertility, adrenal dysfunction, gut health, and immune dysregulation. I'm also well-versed in sports nutrition and enjoy helping recreational and semi-professional athletes maximize their physical performance. My functional medicine training and client experience, combined with my compassion and realistic view of health, makes me a well-prepared partner for you in your journey towards better physical, mental, and spiritual health. If you're looking to build a relationship with a qualified health consultant who takes the time to get to know you as a unique person, then you'll love working with me as your own personal functional nutritionist. The first step to becoming a client of mine is to book a functional nutrition strategy session. On this 30-minute strategy call, I will provide a review of your current diet and lifestyle approach, clarity on what's holding you back from making progress towards your goals, and I'll help you come up with a personalized game plan for optimizing your health. If at the end of this call we decide it would be a good fit to work together on this plan, we'll have the opportunity to discuss my consultation packages and services, and even to get started working together for a longer-term partnership so that way you can experience lasting results. To book your session, go to lauraschoenfeldrd.com and click the menu button that says Work With Me. You can learn more about how I work with clients and book your strategy session from there. I look forward to meeting with you soon.